here I am today in the We Love Guitars shed. Oh, this is so wrong. With a, I don't even know if I can put a guitar on left-handed. Oh, it feels quite natural in a funny sort of way. This is Uwes Bakers. Oh my goodness, is this how you do it in left-hand world? Ooh, it's so strange. Ooh, is that right? It is, isn't it? I've never done this before in my life. Oh, I look like one of those. No, I was going to say I look like one of those terrible advertising models shown holding a guitar who's clearly never played a guitar before. I can't even fake. You know how you see them, typical clothes models given a guitar to hold, and they sort of, you know, probably a bit like me now. But even playing it left-handed, I don't think I can still approximate that caggy I've never played a guitar feel. Because even left-handed, you sort of begin to know where things are. I broke both my wrists in a motorcycle crash 20 years ago now or something. Badly broken, and I don't have so much flexibility, especially in the right wrist. So this would be a real challenge for me to bend my wrists round. It's hard enough, sort of sometimes playing rhythm, but so I do no doubt look ham-fisted with this. But I managed to play yesterday. I managed to play all right now upside down, which I could probably do better. No, I couldn't because I can't get the. How does the strap work upside down? Oh well, maybe. This is going to be fun. Woohoo! This isn't how it was meant to be, Mr. Hendrix. So this is first of all, I haven't plugged this guitar in at all. It came yesterday, all the way from Germany. And I have to say, Uwe has packed it in the most, without doubt, there's the thing, without doubt, the best packaging anybody has ever sent me a guitar. I mean, it was utterly and totally indestructible, which is great. In fact, it was so good that I couldn't fit all the packaging back into the box once I'd taken the guitar out. That's a sort of quantum physics problem going on right there. But anyway, it was brilliantly done, so, oh blimey. So let's hear if and what these sound like. Does anything work? No, that's a start point. Okay, I don't even know which way is on and which way is off. Okay, we have got something. Yay. So I was playing, what was I playing yesterday? Well, it wasn't that because it's out of tune. Hang on. So this is a Bakers Les Paul copy. So it was a Bakers Les Paul copy with a broken string. This is a 10, that one. I just hold off that one. So it's a Bakers, and I've never seen this brand before, and I'd be kind of interested to see if you have, but it's you know, everything about it is very sort of standard budget Les Paul copy, which is no bad thing. This has come here for a full-on improvement to the best it can be kind of improvement. So Uwes obviously has a personal attachment to this guitar, and you know, it's clearly not an expensive brand of any kind, and it's a budget model, but it's evidently worth taking some care of to make it play as good as it can. Well, that's why it's here. So let's get this rethreaded. Anyway, so you can see that it's well, I'll show you in a minute. It's a set neck, which is, you know, some people think is automatic the mark of a makes a good guitar, and actually in my experience doesn't really confer that much on it, I have to say. Now, which way am I tuning? This way. This is like a Chinese puzzle for me. I can't quite get my head around what way the tuners are supposed to be turning, even if they're supposed to be different at all. I'm going to have to go and get my my other Les Paul out and test them to see if these are actually, is there such a thing as a left-hand set for a 3-a-side? I don't even know that. Sorry if it sounds thick, but I can't even get my head around it. Of course there is a difference in a left-hand inline set, which also hurts my brain. But anyway, we shall see. We'll work it out. But I'm going to tune this and try and see if it feels different from normal tuning, because I'm sure it's working the same way, which means a 3-a-side set behave the same for a left-handed as for a right-handed guitar. Anyway, so back to where we weren't. Very dead strings anyway. Yesterday I was playing All Right Now. Yeah, left-handed. Of course, it's got to have the right sort of tone to it. Whoa, yikes! Whew. That's not normal. Blimey. Woo.
This has never happened before in the history of pickups.
Blimey. Sorry. So, rule number 1. Well, that's interesting. So, in the classic mode, this thing was feeding back, yeah, like a bugger. That's wrong. No. It doesn't make any sense, but that's because I'm playing back front. Right. Okay. Well, we know it works. That's the thing. But what we do know as well is it's massively microphonic. So, piece of, what in his email, Uwe said that he quite liked the tone of these pickups, but I guess the reality is, looking at this, is that being as microphonic as this, they're going to be impossible to play live. So I'm gonna sort of suggest to him that maybe a set of Wilkinsons or something, budget price but really nice quality, would make all the difference in this. And this really, because you couldn't turn your amp up on this; it would just squeal itself to death, which is a real shame. So looking at this then, just objectively, we've got presumably a Chinese, presumably a Chinese-made Les Paul copy, and obviously left-hand. It's got the bog standard inexpensive parts. The neck pickup is sunk right down here. That could even be to try and stop it from squealing so much, but it's got your basic inexpensive components. It's also got some kind of unpleasant looking gunge on the head, on the neck here, which actually probably could sand out a little bit. We could see if it comes out. I don't know if it's permanent. Maybe even kind of look at putting some extra lacquer on this, because it's missing some lacquer here and there. It's a bit, yeah, it's all a bit sort of bumpy and odd. But you know, it deserves to live again. This is a classic kind of underdog, reloved underdog. So, what are the options for something like this? Well, you know, you've got the guitar body, you've got the neck join. You know, these are the first couple of things that are important. You know, if they're solid and stable and there's nothing wrong with them, then you've got the makings of a guitar. As simple as that. The next question is, I mean, an obvious one, but it isn't always the case. Is to say, well, is this actually, you know, is the bridge in the right place? That's another real consideration. What I'm going to do, by the way, is that as I'm talking, I think I'll just start removing bits, and I'll put them in a special container, which I will put a name on a bit later on. But I'll start taking things off just so that we can see what's going on. Because so just in terms of the, I suppose you could call it a triage, isn't it, on a budget guitar? So what's what? Neck and body join is good. The issue is the bridge in the right place? Well, the quick way of telling you that is to find a string that's clear enough to ring, and ping the 12th fret wherever that lives. Oh yeah. Okay, so to me that sounds just fractionally sharp on the fretted 12th. which suggests, what did I do with my, oh, there's my thing. It suggests to me that the intonation could be tweaked a little bit. The thing I'm looking for, I suppose, when I'm looking at it from this perspective, it's what I'm asking is, and I think I talked about this with Uwe before he sent it, is the first questions I had for him were, right, first of all, is there enough material on the frets to bring this back up to level and to create a nice playing fretboard? And the answer, and he sent me some considerable photographs, and the answer is yes, there is enough material, even though the frets have actually been stomped on pretty heavily up here. They're jumbo frets, so there's enough room. That's question number one. Second one is, does the truss rod adjust the neck? So do we have some control over the relief? That's the second one. Obviously the third one, you know, is the neck joint solid, you know, and if that's the case, then actually what we're working with is the basics of a guitar that works and we can do something with. The rest of the stuff is down to setup, down to kind of clean up. It's also down to you know, hardware and wiring and stuff that you want to change out. So the essence of this, or the baseline of this, is okay. So the next question is, as I said, is the neck attached solidly? Yes. Is the bridge in the right place? I'm going to get the tuner out for this. It strikes me that, even these are crappy old strings, but it strikes me right now that this is ringing slightly sharp, and I want to make sure before I go any further that I can ever remember where I hung up the. Where did I hang? There they are. I want to make sure before I go any further that we will eventually be able to intonate this, because again, it's one of those things that if all else is equal, we don't want to go down the road of we don't want to find that we've gone put a load of time and energy into this thing, and then actually turns out we can't get the bridge, you know, we can't intonate it because the bridge is off position, which by the way is the case of the guitar hanging over there, which I've got to get rid of. So let's take our, let's do it on its only a playing position, but we'll use the thing there. Where's the 12th? There. Plectrum has gone walk keys. There it is. actually it's alright. That's a little sharp. As is the lower two. So they need to come back, but that's doable because there's some intonation room on there. So there's the majority of them are okay, but for a couple. So that's good. That means that essentially the bridge is in the right place, so we're not kind of hiding to nothing. As we would say in the UK, it's a strange expression. Hiding to nothing. I don't really know what it means. Does it mean you take a beating for no good reason? Maybe that's what it means. A hiding, this is for Uwe by the way, a hiding in English is an expression that means getting a beating. Got a good hiding. So a hiding to nothing means you take a good beating for no good reason. Anyway, okay, so bridge is in the right place. All the hardware is very bog standard and cheap, but everything basically works. The tuners aren't very positive. They could be improved. The one thing that we checked was I asked Uwe to check was the truss rod, and he checked that, so we're pretty sure that works. But I'll have another look in a minute as we we'll take the cover off and peer under there. Meanwhile, we'll see what we've got under here. Some little dings and chips taken out of this. I think the ugliest bit, if anything, is the kind of markings on the neck. Wow. Okay. Woo. Okay. Loads of wire, but that's all right. Slightly curved and bent plastic plate here, which we could try and flatten out with a bit of gentle heat, so it sits more tidily on the back plate. But also could do with, the whole thing could do with shielding as well, which is one of the options that we can do. I've got just about enough copper shielding right now to do this one. So yeah, I mean, ooh, yikes. This is interesting. This is very budgety. How well you can see that. It's quite common. It's a factory build, but it's a very agricultural factory. So somebody's, they've routed the pocket, and then the operative has discovered that maybe they haven't got enough long shafted pots. So what they've done is they've taken a smaller little Dremel router or something, and they've cut deeper. I do that on my guitars to fit some of the switches which don't go through the oak, and I do it with a chisel. But that's it's what you'd kind of expect in a home setup, but less common in a factory setup. And I suspect these are short-necked pots when really they should be long-necked pots. Okay, so look, we've got. We'll take this all apart. One of the things, what I won't do, although I'm going to take everything off, I'm going to leave most of it on for the time being, because while we've got the strings on there, I know that Uwe sent me a set of sacrificial strings, especially a set of Thomann strings, but actually we might as well work, we could equally work the ones that we've got on here. Take this off and see what we're looking at. I do recommend pickup change on this. You don't want shrieking, squealing pickups. I can't see any plus side for that. So I'm just going to write down what makes sense here. So I would suggest Wilkinson pickups, budget but good quality. Actually some Wilkinson tuners, even a roller bridge, wiring and pots, shielding. I mean, it's practically everything, you know, shielding, copper, new nut. Pots switch would be all right, to be honest. I mean, it's much of a muchness. So basically, with the fret level and overall clean, we've got a sort of scope of stuff to do, and of course there's an investment in all of that, which I mean, pickups, let's say £35, tuners 25, so you're looking at £60, 75 with the bridge, 75, I think 25 wiring and pots, 100 quid, and then the fret level and setup 200, about two, a total of about 220. And I know that Uwe wanted a Morris on the back of here, which we can also do fairly simply. We've got that nice rub-on poly lacquer. So my feeling is, do I want to do? I think I want to take care of the fret leveling early to get these frets into condition, because, sorry, this is Morris trying to get in. I was keeping you out, my friend, because, come on Morris, I was keeping him out because it's windy and cold out there. Come on campers. Yeah Morris, come and sit on here next to the, what's usually the warm thing. Come on, sit on here. Alright my friend, come and say hello to Uwe. You might be watching this. Morris sends his best wishes. He's going to have a look, just do a bit of quality control. What do you think? Yeah, so I guess doing the fret leveling first, even with these old dead strings, because they're only there as Morris, put your head out of the way. They're only there as indicators, really, or guides. So a reason to do that first will be to make sure that there is enough fret metal, because if there isn't, then we have a different proposition, which is to put some other frets on. And okay, you're done. Let's sit you down on here. You can have that. You can have the have the heating on. There, Norris. Lovely. He's just going to go out the door and let all the heat in. Okay, so yeah, that's my that's my view. I'm going to do the fret leveling first, and then I'll take every bit of component off, and then we'll redo it from the ground up. Now I do, as I take the thingies off, I do need to do I need to? Yeah, I need to replace the nut now. It's just getting these things in a kind of sensible order. Let's get access to the truss rod, and these are the different screws. So yeah, we'll get access to the truss rod, and we'll get the action set up with a new nut, exactly, irrespective of the mucky fingerboard, which we can do some, use a blade and we can use a blade and tidy that up later. But for now, we'll get the physics or the geometry of the action right, and then we'll go at it with as a fret leveling, and you know, if we come across any problems. Okay, so I'm going to knock off this nut right now. So I'll just dig up our bone replacement. What have we got? It's a sort of, it can be either shaped one. Okay, let's just cut along. This has been painted up to the edge, so somebody's changed out this. I didn't put up much of a fight. It's got sort of what looks like household paint on there, but it's a horrible plastic beastie. Okay, so actually it's no more nails it's been stuck with, which is why it's kind of spilled over onto the fretboard a bit. So partly what I'm going to do to clean up this fingerboard later is to use a blade, because there's some sort of imperfections and gunge all over it. So we can clean a lot of that up with this blade approach. I'm going to use my my nut slot sanding thing just to clean up this the slot base a little bit, or the nut slot I should say. And this stuff is a bit putty-ish, so it's not providing me the best surface to work on, but it's not impossible, and we can still have no real problem gluing on top of it. It's not, it hasn't formed the tidiest looking seal you've ever seen. By the time we put a new one in, excuse me, we're going to have a bit of overhang of paint or no more nails here, which we could touch up with some white or cream, sorry, vintage cream coloured lacquer over there. In fact, there's a kind of crusty lip here which I'm going to cut off right now, which is kind of, it's raises up to meet the edge of the original nut, which is a bit ugly, so I'm going to cut that away for a second. And if we need to, like I say, we can add some fresh cream nitrocellulose lacquer, which will look a whole lot more like the business than this no more nails stuff. Now the main concern here is it's just that this is a flat right angled joint between the new nut and the fingerboard, which this is. It's very nice. The other thing is it's got to be the right width, and it's got to be tall enough, which it is. And in fact, this is too tall, and so I could make it easier on myself by sanding a bit down from the bottom. And there are ways to do this, but I find it quite. I'd rather cut down from above and then reshape the nut rather than take it from the bottom, and that gives me better control over the accuracy of it. So straight away I'm going to let loose with a little dab of super glue, and we're going to put this new bone nut on in place, and that's going to be the basis for the new setup. This isn't, strangely enough, this isn't the thickest glue I've got, which hopefully it'll still stick fairly well. Pull the strings out of the way, lever this into place, make sure that the high E and low E's are where we want them to be. Now while I'm there, while the strings are off, I'm going to mark up the strings, and then I'm going to, if I can do it fairly soon, I'm then going to put the strings back in the slots and hopefully use a bit of downward force from the strings, if I can, to push or keep the nut firmly in place. It's probably the best way to hold it in place while the glue sets. Only I should have probably done this marking first. Now, using a marker pen on a white Les Paul copy requires care and precision, so you don't miss. And then you want to get the middle ones in first and tighten those up to sort of hold the guitar in place, and you've got to equalize the pull excuse me, on either side, and then gradually bring it up all over across the board. Otherwise you'll pull the nut sideways, and that's just a right pain. And it's only a matter of guesswork, but there we go. Now this, as it happens, this is a right-handed nut, which is fine because I'm going to recut the slots anyway to get down. Right now they're miles high, so I'll recut as we go down. So it's just a matter of, for now, it's just a matter of placing them. That's a good thing about having so much spare material. So I've got a bit left over at the end because this is a millimetre wider than a standard one, and actually that's quite good. I like that positioning. So all I really want now is the nut to sit in place and glue. And I'll take this glue stick out of the way. So we have the sort of one of the kind of important parts of the equation in place. Like I say, the next one will be to recut these. Now I'm going to close this door so I don't get too cold again. Got one of those stable barn door type shutting things, that means nobody can get in. And of course if it ever shuts while I'm outside the shed, then I'm going to have to break in myself. Okay, so here I need to get myself a set of strings. Now for this guitar I don't have the bag, so I don't remember what Uwe sent me. I'm going to go with 10s to begin with. So I'll basically end up cutting, or I'm going to imagine we're cutting for 10s, that's what I'm saying. So I'm using the numbers on 10s. I'll find out exactly what size we want to put on later on. But I'll cut for 10 gauge. So that means I'm choosing my files with care from the whole collection. So we want 13, sorry if this is a bit messy, 13, 17, 24, 32, 42 and a 48, maybe with a bit of wiggle. Okay, so that's my 10 gauge set there. And I'm going to go for my 0.3 over the first fret. I'm going to work outwards from the low E. Now what I need to do, sorry, I need to get this to pitch, roughly to pitch, anyway. Okay, that will do. So just the reason I want I want to keep some of the strings at least in pitch is I need them when I'm cutting the slots. I want them to be at the right at sort of full tension, so that they will be sure to sit into the slot properly under the correct tension. If you don't have the right tension, there's a danger they can kind of catch halfway down and give you a false reading. Okay, so remember this is a back to front nut, so I'm cutting the new slots with these gauge files. So here I'm starting with, I'm going back outwards from the 24 up to 13, coming this way. Just keeping my mind focused on what I'm actually doing. And so I'm just going to cut a little bit. It's the same as the right-handed, only in reverse. And the point being is I'm going to make sure that I cut the slots, recut a new width to represent the correct left-handed spread. So the principle is exactly the same, obviously working backwards and with a gauge that's big enough to take the gauge you want with a bit of wriggle room. So you don't, I've found the hard way, you really don't want to be working with a exact gauge that you're planning to string it with, because it just creates sticking in the slot. No matter how carefully you try to do it, the fact that the nut has some depth to it means it never cuts, and you never get the string go through absolutely trouble free. It's always likely to, the deeper the nut, the more it's likely to stick going through, and the more there's a spread of the string coming out at an angle, it's going to catch too. So I always go a couple of gauges nearly above to make sure. And of course all factory guitars, there we go, that's on. Factory guitars are sent out with nuts that accommodate a range of string gauges. So the idea that you'd have one set to just a 9 gauge is nonsense, because if somebody wanted to change to a 13 or 11, even 10 or 11, they simply wouldn't be able to, and it would be absolutely unacceptable. Your guitar would be unplayable. So they're not designed that way. They're designed cut over size so that you have a range of gauges you can switch to. So I'm using a triangular file there just to give me a head start on widening this slot, and then I'm kind of continuing then with the gauge that I want, which itself is, as I said, a little over the actual gauge of the strings I'm going to be using. But you've got quite a lot of leeway. There's quite a lot of, you can, for example, I'm aiming to accommodate a 13 string in here, so I'm using a 17. Now if you're a 9 playing 9s, that string here is actually an 11 and we're cutting with a 17 thou thing. It's not going to jump out the slot or rattle around or buzz. If you think about it, every factory made guitar is built with a B slot, for example, that will accommodate comfortably a gauge from 9 through to 11 or even up to 13 possibly. So you can tell there is a lot of leeway, or a lot of room. We're nearly there on this one. So these didn't need much widening, because of course they're the wide slots anyway. On this nut being a left hand, it's these that's going to need more cutting, but that's fine. So the first fret action, some people say, well, you should adjust the truss rod first and so on, and you can, if you've got experience of it, you can kind of start in one place and then move into the other place and change things around. You don't have to be rigid in how you approach it. That's a bit more room in that one. So for example, I'm working this down to my desired 0.3 action. I'm coming back to the G a minute. I'm going down to my desired 0.3, and if I make an adjustment to the action down there, this will change very slightly, but I know it's still going to be very close to where I want it to be, because the angles change very, very slightly when you make adjustments at the other end. Good for now. Loads of room. So now I'm going to be working on the 13, which conveniently broke off, giving me access to the unused part of the blade for a change, which is nice, because when you use these things after a while they can get blunt, and breaking them or cutting them in half actually gives you back a new lease of life, which is kind of convenient. A cheap way of excuse me, getting some more life out of your nut slots. So there's a little tip: when they get blunt, cut off the ends and use a fresh bit down the middle that you haven't used before. So I'm just working this one, this 13 again. Remember we're aiming for a 10 string, and I'm using a 13 gauge file. So there's going to be plenty of room for a 10 or even a 9 or an 8. But you would even accommodate an 11 without too much problem. But you'll notice, and we'll see in a minute when I've done this, that even having used such an oversized gauge, you still will find the slots stick and grab the string, and you have to widen them with sandpaper, it still happens like that, so it's quite amazing. Okay, I'm nearly down on the mark for this top E. That'll do. So there we are, that's the top 3 strings, pretty much where I want them prior to any other adjustments. Now I'm going to work and take off the bottom 3, or the bottom 2, and then work outwards from this one. Now these are going to need a bit of digging with the triangle file because they're quite shallow slots, so a head start with this file will be good, and then we'll carry on with the nut file after that. You can see I'm angling backwards. The purpose of that is to make sure that when the string comes up the back of the nut, it launches off the top front edge, and the way of making sure of that is to have this backward tilt to the slot. If it was a flat and it didn't have that tilt, then you run the risk of the string starting somewhere on the further back on the nut, which is actually what happened on the headless guitar I made recently. There we go. Using the nut that came with it is a metal one. Using the metal nut, I couldn't get it, so it's here actually. I couldn't get it quite right, so because it's hard to cut metal slots in metal, and it turned out that some of the strings were starting a little further back inside the nut itself, and as a result the intonation was out. So making sure that the slot comes up and the string launches off that top front edge is really important. Okay, so we've got our mark. Let's cut in fact, let's cut a little bit with this. The good thing about the V file is that it locates itself in the finest of the slots very easily, and you can then start the slot that you want to put your bigger file into. So it doesn't take a long time to do this, but you can see that it requires some precision to get it right, and it's a lot about repetition and taking care, but it repays the effort massively. Getting this first part action right, in my experience, makes probably the biggest of all differences, of all adjustments you can make, makes the biggest difference of all to the way the guitar feels and plays, which is quite something. And adjustments here single-handedly will make the guitar feel easier to play by a mile, more so than any adjustment you can make anywhere else, whether it be with the truss rod or the action at the bridge or any such thing. Here is the biggest pound for pound impact. We're just on the mark there. I'm going to stop with the help of the triangular file. So again, I'm going to just help start this one because we're on the reverse nut, so I've got the finest of slots here, which I'm going to just kind of mark out with the triangle file, and then I'm going to go with the 48 file here to cut it. Now, the 48 file cuts quite slowly, so it can be quite difficult. It can be quite difficult to get it to cut down to where you want it to be, so it can feel quite frustrating. So if you're careful, you can get a head start with the triangular file. That takes a pretty big chunk of material away quickly. But you have to have the confidence to know when to stop with that and revert to the file of the gauge you want. And the important thing about these files is the gauge, but it's more the profile of the bottom of the file, which is a kind of semicircular almost. So it means that it creates the right sort of profile for the for the string to sit in. In my ebook I show how to do all the slots with this kind of file, but it makes a very sharp V notch, so you still want something of this shape or profile to bottom out the slot. And I recommend the cheap welding nozzle cleaners that you can buy on eBay, which are used by a lot of guitar techs actually as a cheap alternative to nut files. And you know, they're harder to use, but they're very effective if you're on a budget, and certainly combined with this method they're very good. Which is why I covered it that way in my ebook. And we're nearly there with this. I'm going to sort of try and stay away from the triangular file at this point. I'd like to get there under the steam of this, but it's not blunt exactly, but it's a slow cut. But I'm happy I'm there on that cut. Okay, so look, that's the new nut in place, and the action more or less set. Now I'm going to jump backwards a stage, and I'm going to check and adjust the, if necessary, I'm going to check and adjust the neck curvature or the relief. And to do that, I just want to clamp down, use the thingy, capo, to clamp down the strings behind the first fret. And I'm just going to use the hold down the strings at the far end, and we've got a pretty flat profile there, so I'm going to give it some adjustment. Now if it's flat, we want to slacken it off to let the strings pull a bit of curvature into it, ideally. Now this is going to very tiny fraction increase the playing action over the first fret from what I've just set, but it's so small that it's going to be almost of no consequence at all. And for the kinds of playing action I'm happy with, it's not going to make any meaningful difference at all, such that I need to worry about. One of the things, by the way, I'm going to do is I'm going to need to take off this lip here, and I'm going to do it with a Dremel, because believe it or not, I can actually Dremel this more accurately than I can file it. So I can do it and make a bit of noise in a second. So having turned the truss rod adjuster, we're hoping that it does actually work and give us a bit of clearance. There's a tiny bit here, not a lot. Let's leave it sink in, and while I'm at it, let's do a little bit of a buzz cut on that sticking out bit of nut. Now the point of doing it now is if it's pretty much impossible to cut something flush or level with some other material without doing some sort of damage. If you use a file, you're going to hit this. If you use this, got a bit more control over it and you're less likely to hit it. But either which way, if we scuff this, then we can polish it up and add a bit of lacquer to it. So here's what I do. The smell of burning bones. Almost there. A little bit more. Whoops, sorry. Lovely. Tasty. Chinese bones. Anyway, the point is that I could never have done that with a file. There's something about the precision you can get with a Dremel that allows me to get that's almost smooth. And if I just put one coat of lacquer over that, or if I sand this a little bit to remove some of these imperfections and then put a coat of lacquer over, a light coat of polyurethane lacquer over this, it'll be fine. It blends in absolutely perfectly. The other thing is, once I've done the fret leveling and I take the strings off, I'm going to reshape this so that we lose these high edges. We don't need them. So okay, so I've made my small truss rod adjustment, and at the moment it's given me some room on the base side, but there's not a lot of move or space on the treble side, but it's enough. So I'm going to go with that. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use a screwdriver. I'm going to use a screwdriver. I will use a screwdriver. Okay. That one. I'm going to adjust the saddle action now. And basically I'm going to do my usual trick of measuring it off the final fret. Now on a Les Paul copy, or a Les Paul, you should be able to get down to sort of 1.5. Now, given the Les Paul has a sort of fixed part of the neck here where you can't really, it doesn't bend, or it doesn't bend with the curvature of the neck. It's pretty much welded or wedged into place, so it's difficult to make any adjustments. So that's why you tend to find people hit the frets here quite hard, because a lot of techs do a thing called fall away or fall off, I think it's called. Now this is currently on 2.5mm, which is about 1.5 mils too much. So I'm going to go right way down to what we want it to be, which is about 1mm at this edge. So it's way low compared to what we've actually got. So there's a 1 point, to be honest, that's 1.25, and that's 1.25. So we'll come up a fraction here and down a minuscule fraction here. That's somebody going through our gates into the footpath. So 1mm, 1.4. That's a good start point. Of course, this will have changed the tuning, so I just need to put it back into pitch. And once it's in pitch, the next fun bit happens, which is to make sure, or to ascertain, oh, it's so strange. Ah. Right, here's the fun bit. So you can see we've put a bit of relief into the neck. There wasn't any before. We've got the nut, the first fret actions really nice and low the way I want them, and we've got the action lowered now at the bridge to give the last fret action that I would ideally like from a good Les Paul. So the next question is, do the notes now play? What happens? What is the underlying state of the frets? And that's what you now find out. So you start to play the notes. Well, they all play so far. But you can hear there are some issues definitely around there. But it's not too bad. Not as bad as I thought. Well, okay. There's one really high one down here. But on the whole, this will work. Okay, so Now we're in a position to do the fret leveling, and I've got a freshly, pretty much one, it's only been used once, so a freshly re-sandpapered tool, banana tool as I like to call it, in honour of another tool that shall remain nameless. And now I'm going to put this into practice, and I'm going to just, well, let's work backwards. Ooh! Why am I going to work backwards? It doesn't really matter. But let's work backwards. I'm going to start at the near side and go that way. Only because I normally start on the thin strings and come that way, so let's do it backwards. So what I'm doing is I'm going to get my Allen key, and I'm going to tune my tunable leveling tool to mimic or copy or match the radius curve, no, not radius curve, the relief curve, the longitudinal curvature of this neck as we've set it in our ideal playing position, or the position we want to make the guitar play in, the action we want it to play with. Now remember, you know, we set the action that I want, which is 1.5 millimeters, way low on the 1.3-ish on the bass side and 1 on the treble side. And that's really challenging low action. Now what happens is, since every guitar, bar none almost, has uneven frets, it's somewhere in the mix. Just by virtue of the way the process goes, it's impossible to put in frets completely level from scratch. It's not impossible, but it's very rare. Because all guitars have uneven frets, they are hidden until you lower the action to a certain level. Now most people lower the action until those uneven frets make themselves known, and they make themselves known by buzzing, choking notes, and we've all heard that. And what happens then is that the user, the owner of the guitar, backs off the action at the bridge usually to a point where the clearances are enough to undo the choking, buzzing caused by the odd uneven fret, relatively uneven fret. Now what I'm doing with this method, and why it's a good method for me, is that we're setting the action that we want, and we're making the frets comply with that, which is a different way around. Normally the owner makes the guitar comply with the state of the frets they're given. We're choosing the action we want and make the frets comply with that, and that's what this tool is about. Now when people level frets in all manner of ways, what they're doing is they're aiming to give themselves the best possible chance they've got of a low, fast playing action. And most of the methods for leveling frets work on a sort of absolute levelness. In other words, people will use a fret rocker or some such device to keep leveling until they're pretty confident that they've got absolute levelness, absolute relative levelness between all of the frets in the sequence, and then they'll restring and crown the frets and go off and play. Now this method doesn't do it by an abstract thing. What it does is, because it's doing it in the playing position with curvature in it and curvature in the tool, this method allows me to take away only as much unevenness as I need to make this string play all the notes the way I want it to play at this chosen action. And that means instead of chasing an absolute levelness as dictated by a fret rocker or a radius block, for example, or a perfect straight edge, I'm only chasing as much levelness as I need to make the action I've chosen play, which means that below that level, sub 1 millimeter at this end, there will still be some residual unevenness, but I don't care about that. I don't want to take it away for no reason. If I'm not going to come near hitting, or if that unevenness isn't going to come into play, there's no point taking away the metal to make everything an abstract or a notional level of evenness. It's just an intellectual, if you like, abstract. So what I'm doing is, this method levels to make it play. Now, just taking a track along here, you probably can see if I follow let's follow in the light where I can see. I'm putting this by my, sorry, it's going to get me loud, but I'm putting it by my eye so you can probably see what I'm saying. So straight away you can see that this method is cutting quite a lot on this one, a little bit here, a bit here, a bit here, none there, so that's lower relative to all of these. That's still a problem. A bit of cutting there, none there, that's relatively low. Then here you've got a massively high one, none, no cutting or hardly any, none, hardly any, hardly any, hardly any, loads. And you remember that E string was choking right off there, that's what you're seeing. That's the high frets that this method is now taking off to make this play. So the great thing about this method is, unlike the other methods where you just have to kind of go for an abstract or an arbitrary total levelness, this method I can put the string back in, pick up my musket, and remember we hadn't got a note down here at all. We now have the note back. See, now just that means I can, if I want, I can stop there. Every single note on that track now plays. I am done in that track. Next one, I will keep the same as I do for the first two tracks. I will keep the same calibration on the tool. And what I'm going to do, just move these things, is I'm just going to work the tool now into the B track, and I'm going to recalibrate before I move to the G track to make sure I track as I go across the radius, the profile, as I go across the radius this way. Sometimes the relief curve changes slightly, and I expect it to get a little bit bigger over here. It feels bigger on this side than this side, so I expect to need to adjust the rod and increase the curvature as I go across. Now what's great about this method is also, I'm pretty much at the moment just using gravity or the weight of the tool, and I don't want to press down on it because I don't really want to distort or bend the bar. I want it to keep as much as possible the curve that I originally put into it that mimics the relief curve of the neck, and that's the beauty of this. If I am gentle and I don't over stress it, I can very accurately copy the curve, the relief curve. Now what that means, and again I wish I should pull you from here, remember this issue of fall away on the Les Paul neck. Very often the Les Paul neck, from literally from the 13th fret onwards, sort of gets fixed for several reasons. One is it triples in thickness here. It's also then glued in to sort of two sides at least, but one massive wall of mahogany or whatever. So this thing is kind of rigid, it can't bend, and as a result you often find that these frets here are the ones that completely obstruct any high notes, and often that's why some luthiers put this thing called fall away, where they create a ski slope from about this fret backwards to just guarantee that whatever you're fretting is going to be clear of the next fret. Nice thing about this method is it doesn't do that. What it does is it actually gently cuts the curve it needs into this. Now as it happens, it ends up cutting quite a bit on these frets to make sure they play all the notes as you come up here, but instead of making an arbitrary ski slope that just says, well, I'm going to cut it so slopey that I guarantee that nothing's going to obstruct each fret as I fret it, this thing cuts a gentle curve and respects the original relief curve of the neck, but as it happens it takes away what it needs to build that working curve into the neck. Because even here, so let me just rephrase that. So this tool compensates for the fact that this neck, part of the neck, can't bend by cutting the curve into the frets that it needs, as opposed to the luthiers who go, I'm just going to cut a massive slope just to avoid any problems. So that's why I like this method, amongst other things. It's fractionally, I would say it's 10% more accurate than the other methods, but more importantly I think is that it preserves maximum amount of fret material, because you can do this. You can stop, a little bit of work still there, you can stop, see, and play your way through all the notes, and that from experience now tells me we're nearly there on this one, but a little bit more work. And what it also tells me is I'm going to recalibrate just to make sure. Now there's one of the things I've learned is it just makes complete sense to keep recalibrating. You could use the same curve profile all the way across, but even in using it, this thing will come marginally undone just by nature of how it works. And you can see that there's a gap now, and I need to just give it a little bit more curvature, and it's such a tiny adjustment that hardly bears, you can't even describe how little it takes. But once you've done it a little bit more, you get to touch all three of these pieces simultaneously, and you've got the curve mapped. And once you're there, you know it. There it is. And now I'm going to do the B again, so what I call the B track again, with this slightly recalibrated curve. And again, I'm going to just use the same light touch as possible. Now we know from looking at the condition of these frets that it's going to take a fair bit of work to get them to a really nice playing condition, but that's the nature of a budget, often a Chinese budget guitar like this, which is not going to be in good condition, I'm afraid. You know, you don't, and certainly looking at the condition of the frets that it came with, they've been sort of hit on by somebody in the past trying to make it play, which is understandable because they've obviously encountered some serious choking problems and they've gone at it with files and sandpaper. But so this is a much more effective way of doing the whole lot in one go. So still a little bit there, and the reason that's there, by the way, this is really elegant. You can probably see. Notice how that hasn't been hardly been touched. The issue when you do fret leveling this way, what you begin to realise is that the low frets are your real problems. It's the low frets that dictate. They're like the lowest common denominator, if you like to use a maths term. So all of these might be relatively even until you get to here, and what's happening is your finger's falling into a hole because this is lower, and so down the string goes, and therefore it shuts off the clearance here, which gives you the slight buzz. We're nearly there, but it's that low one. So everything else is kind of there, but it's that one low fret at the moment that's dictating what goes on, and so I'll stick with it, and that's what the judgment call is. Now it may be, and it's not uncommon, that after you get a guitar where somebody has worked on a fret, one or two frets on their own because there's been a problem, and in fact I did recently a Seagull S6 acoustic, and the guitar had turned out, I began to realise the guitar had been dropped at some point, and as a result it had sort of gouged the frets. And so somebody had taken their fret rubber or a piece of sandpaper and fixed locally, if you like, fixed the gouges. And in doing so they'd taken a patch of, in fact it was up here, a patch of frets right down compared to all the rest. And the problem is that you, without taking all the others down, or replacing that group of frets, there was no way you were going to get a low action out of this guitar, because creating either one fret as a hole or a cavity or a series of frets dictates, basically what I'm doing here is I'm bringing everything down gently to meet the lowest common denominator. Now the judgment call comes in whether you decide that are you near enough this to worth carrying on, have your frets got enough material to allow you to carry on and bottom out this low spots, or if that is for some reason is so much lower, it could even be the wrong gauge of wire that's been put in the past. You have to make a judgment call and say, actually I'm not going to drag all of these down and take 6 months off or 2 years off the playing life of this guitar to reach this one. I'm going to pull this fret out. It's so clearly wrong, I'm going to pull it and replace it, and actually if anything take it down again in line with all these others. As it happens, we've got the number of variables here conspire to make the judgment call such that I'm saying, okay, we've got incredibly low action, which immediately we could dial this up a tiny fraction and clear this problem, but we're almost there, and I'm comfortable that having done that, now we play this and it will be pretty good. There you go, I'm done. So, you know, it's a judgment call, but you need to sort of say to yourself, am I going to go any further with this? So now I want to go into the G area, the G spot slot, and what I'm doing is I'm going to this. On this case, normally when I do the guitars I go to the north of the string and I come this way. This way I'm going to the south of the string and going that way. So I'm south of the G string here. No British smutty toilet humours, please. And we're British are renowned for that, aren't we? So our European friends tell us. So south of the G string, I'm just recalibrating to make sure this curvature is right. And as I expected, it's it's increasing a little bit as we go across the radius. But again, it's all going as I expected. So now I pull the G string out of the way, and then again I use the new calibrated curve in here, and again letting gravity do the work, and just basically watching what it does along the way. So what I've noticed of people, there's a couple of people who've bought my ebook, have come to me or contacted me at a similar stage. They've got to about here in the process, and they've suddenly got cold feet, if you like, or got scared. And I'll show you why in a second. Let's just work this a little bit more, and I'll do a quick test of the playing, see where we've got to. So I'll take this off and just, oops, give it a test, and then I'll come back to that point about people getting nervous, and I'll show you a close-up as to why. But a little bit more up there still to do. But before I do it, let's take you off the power again. So imagine, let's see what I can see. Okay, so right up close to my eye. So people, imagine you're trying this for the first time. Some people who've bought the ebook have tried it on the hardest of guitars, which in a way is the Les Paul copy, or Les Paul style guitar with this big, thick, unmovable piece of neck. And sometimes they have complicated it by doing it on their most favourite prize guitar, which means they're very precious about it. And on top of that, of course, it's the first time they've done this and they're feeling very nervous. So what they're seeing is this. They're seeing these great big slices taken off the tops of their frets, and it looks really scary. And it looks a lot worse than it is. Now, I can tell you from experience that even these big cuts here will polish out into a beautiful smooth fret. Even these big flat spots. Look at that. Look how much has come off this fret. I mean, it's a huge amount, apparently. But experience tells me that that will round out beautifully, that there's enough material for it to round out, and that once I do it, we'll get a nice, I need a piece of string for this, we'll get a really nice set of frets out of it. But right now at this stage, for those people trying it for the first time, it looks really scary, and people can be kind of nervous at this point that they've wrecked their beautiful guitar. And the truth is, if you continue, you can, if you just keep on scraping away, even though this is 400 grit, it is possible to wear the frets away completely. And so there is a real risk of that, and it's very good to stop and ask, is this going right? But just keep in mind that it's good to be cautious, and it's good to stop, and it's good to assess everything and re-look at it and say, what's going on here? This one's really flattening out because it's just way high for some reason. Two together, but again, even they will polish out, they'll round out and polish out quite nicely. So I'm going to go with that. It's not perfect, but it's good enough. Now the other little judgment call that I bring into play sometimes is, even when we're nearly there on a string like that, and I'm looking at, I don't want to go much lower than this because they are starting to get quite worn down there on those two frets, for example. Now the interesting thing is that what you have to remember is you're not doing something wrong here. The reason those are worn is because those frets are badly seated. They are significantly high, and so in a way it's confirming what you know. If the guitar doesn't play very well, it's because those frets are badly fitted, and all you're doing is you're addressing it in a way that the factory never did or couldn't. Okay, so the judgment call only comes in is will this still be playable at the end of it? Have I got enough fret metal? Can I reshape this into a playable, decent quality fret to make this work, to make this guitar play? So I'm just going to stop there, test this one out, and I think we're on a a sort of nice home stretch now. So another part, that's not bad. I'll do a tiny bit more in there. Another part of this judgment is that sometimes I can stop just before it's perfect, because I know that sanding these frets will, to get them, reshaping them and sanding them and polishing them, will take a fraction more material off them. So I know that stopping just before they're perfect it just gives me, I suppose experience tells me just how much the polishing process will aid the levelling process, if you see what I mean. I'm good with that. This is a very, I'll take a photograph of these because they are quite scary looking in how flat they become. But these are jumbo frets, and there's enough material for this to do its job. So again, I'm recalibrating, ready for the whatever that string is, the A string. And again, a little bit more curvature needed because the radius has, sorry, the relief has increased as we've gone across the radius, and that is about right. Minor, tiny adjustments to get it right. Oh, blimey. This is where the little loop of string comes in very handy. So in a way, although we've just sort of dived straight into this without any new equipment or stuff, it's absolutely fine to do it. What we're doing is the real precision work now, in advance of changing the nice stuff which will make it feel and look a little better, you know, like the tuners or the bridge or the electrics and so on and so on. We're doing the precision stuff here. This is the bit that's going to set the playability of the guitar once and for all. And it's nice to think we'll have got it out of the way already, and that what we can concentrate on next is the kind of the optional stuff. Because the truth is, this guitar now will physically play beautifully. Once we clean it up and put some new strings on, it'll feel like a joy to play. And that's, you know, this is the sort of standard, or the really loved guitar setup. A little bit more to do up there. Yeah, this is the standard really loved guitar setup. Everything else will be now investment in better equipment, just to add that sort of enjoyment factor to it. But the precision work is almost done. And the nice thing is that as long as we keep the nut in place, as long as we don't put in or take away any relief in the neck, and we keep that the same, and then we add similar gauge, very similar gauge strings at the end, this neck will then go back into the position we've currently got it in, and it will play as well as we're setting it now. So that's the great thing about doing this action stuff right at the beginning. It means you can sort of forget all the rest of it and get on with, slightly overcurved now, get on with the sort of cleaning up, cosmetic fixes, hardware upgrades and so on. But even if you stopped now, it would be a joy to play by comparison to what it was. But I really don't think Uwe wants to have squealing microphonic pickups. I think they deserve better than that. Although, you know, I'll go with it if that's what you want to keep. I can't stop them squealing. Wax potting them would be a big drawn out process, which is something I haven't done before anyway. But you know, it would be cheaper to buy a decent set of budget Wilkinsons, which would sound great and cure any such problems straight away. Okay, so there we go. That's kind of continued the pattern of cutting that I would expect all the way to the end. And we'll just do a quick test. Yeah, a little bit of problem still up there, so we'll continue on this track. Again, I'm going to recalibrate. as soon as something seems like it's off, I'm going to just recheck that I've got this curve right. I want it right. That's fractionally too much. You can never recalibrate this too much. Just recalibrate, never too many times. Just keep recalibrating. The closer you get it to the exact curve, the more accurate your leveling will be, and the more satisfying the playing experience. Now remember, like I said, this is an amazingly low action for an old budget guitar like this, so I always kick off by challenging the guitar hugely. Alright, so make no mistakes about this. If we can make this old budget beast play at 1mm on the low E, then we've done a great job. So, it's doubly, trebly satisfying because, you know, we can say, look, you probably won't find a Les Paul, a US Les Paul that plays anywhere near as low and fast as this by comparison. So to be able to do that with a budget no-name brand is very satisfying indeed. I'm good. That's me done. So just as a quick review, partly for Uwes' benefit, let me just check what the time is. 12:31. Okay, so here we've got, look at what we've got. We've got stomped on frets up here. Some not touched at all, but the ones that are troublesome stomped on around this patch here, as you'd expect. Some almost not touched at all, but the majority have been quite well hit. And now the next stage of our game will be to reshape them into workable fret shapes, the way the guitar gods intended them to be. But at this stage, I can put away my leveling tools. The only downside for me about doing left-handed guitars, and it is purely selfish, is that I don't get to experience that thrill of going, wow! I mean, I can sort of, I'm sorry, wow! I can sort of feel it. But I don't get that sort of how different it is feeling because I can't play it in the same familiar way. So I just know from experience that it's there at the right point, which is excellent, but I don't get the payoff quite the same way. So anyway, that's not for me to get the payoff, it's for Uwe to get the payoff. Now, I don't know how to pronounce your name, whether it's Uwe or Uwe or Uwe or Uwe. I used to teach in a university called Uwe. It was called the University of the West of England. I was writing that on Uwes box yesterday, and it just seemed suddenly very familiar to write those three letters together. I was like, where have I done this before? Capital letters, UWE, and it's like, oh yeah, that's right, it used to be my employer. Funny that, eh? So here we go, off comes the stop bar, and off go the strings into the bin. I've had enough of these. Goodbye. So we'll put the stop bar into the box of parts. I don't know if you probably can see. Look at the dust that's come off there. It's filthy. So we're done. I mean, well, we're done. The precision part, the leveling now is set, and whenever we restring this guitar, what it means is the neck will revert to that relative levelness, and it just means that if we want to, we can go down to that 1mm action. We might not want to, or Uwe might not want to, might choose to keep it higher or whatever, but what I know is that it's been now set for that low action, and it will go to that. It's just a matter of turning the bridge posts, and the relative levelness of the frets now is accurate enough to work at that action, which is our target. So just for now, I'm just taking away some of the dust while I'm here, so that it's not kind of over everything. It's only a temporary clean. And what I'll now do is I'll make with the marker pen again And this time, this is going to be a slightly harder than normal job. Oh, sorry, I'm never looking in the right place. So I'm going to mark up the frets again, because now the job is to take these frets and reshape them into a more familiar arch shaped, because obviously this leveling has taken off the top layer and flattened the fret considerably. It has to do that, so we need to take what's remaining, and out of that we need to create a nice arch form without taking the level down any further. Now I use either one of two tools. I use usually the StewMac fret. Okay, yeah, all right. Those probably need gluing in. Maybe let's take everything out. Oh, and those, blimey, okay, everything's just falling out. There's no it's interesting. There's no earthing to the bridge here, which is a bit of a strange thing. We can fix that. Anyway, everything's just coming off. Yeah, so everything will come off. So what was I saying? Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, so yeah, so we're gonna reshape the. I probably lost my train of thought, but we're going to reshape the fret into a nice arch form without taking the level down, because the relative level of these now is firmly fixed, and we don't want to mess with that. We've just spent an hour getting it right. But what we want to do is use this file now to work our way across the flat edge, so like the shoulders of the flat spot. We want to gently file them off and end up with a nice curved fret. And the marker pen allows me to cut the edges with this concave file and kind of cut downwards, but as long as I leave this thinnest possible line of black marker pen down the middle, it tells me I haven't touched the top of the fret, therefore the relative levelness remains the same. And that's what I'm aiming to do, to round off the shoulders but leave a thin line of pen right down the centre. And this is a very good tool for it. Now, if in some cases you may get to a point where you've taken so much off it doesn't quite work, you might need to, and we'll see at the end of this, these are very flat up here, so if they're too flat to work with this, then I would revert to the kind of manual method, which takes a bit longer, but in fact is a little bit more accurate. But these are, sorry, these have got such flat spots on them that you can see the line, the kind of centre line, black line, kind of, you can see how much I have to work at it to reduce that line. And what's really happening is that I'm rounding off the shoulders, the edges of the flat spot, and the more I round them off, the thinner the flat line gets as the fret becomes more like an arch. Sorry, it's moving, it's not very good visuals, but I've only got my elbow to hold it still. So with a bit of kind of care, we get to a similar arrangement as the other frets, even though that one was much more flattened. I'll try and keep this wedged in here. So again, we do this one. Hope you appreciate the struggle I'm doing for this camera angle. And with some frets you can see that one side of it needs a bit more attention than the other with this file, and you sort of adjust your ministrations accordingly. And some of them are pretty much there from the get-go, which means you just stop. If it takes off the top layer straight away, it means that you're riding along the top and you just want to stop, because if you carry on you'll be taking the fret down in height, which is definitely not what we want to do. So you can see on this one I'm working almost entirely on this close side of it, the side nearest to me, and kind of blending it so that we just get that thin line again, same as the other one, and that's pretty much done in one swoop. And the low ones are always like that, they kind of just, they haven't been worked on hardly at all, so you just whiz straight past them, maybe a little bit on one side compared to the other, and there we go. You'll see what fun we get when we get down to this end. done. Whoops, just knocked something over. I'm running out of wire. Sorry, it's a bit wobblicious, isn't it? The nice thing about having it on a thing is that it stops it wobbling. Can I just do this without wobbling? No. And in short, no. Okay, but I do want to keep you with me until we get to this very last couple, because they're going to be quite fun. So one swipe across sort of tells you what you're dealing with, like both ends here but not the middle. There you go. And something similar. A bit here and a bit there. Now the reason I'm reshaping these, and some people, I've quite regularly inherited guitars where somebody's bothered to fret level it, but they haven't bothered to reshape the frets, i.e. reprofile them, I do this. And they're playable, but the reason why we go to the trouble of doing this is because if you see, I'm going to point with something sharpish, if you look closely at the fret, when something's flattened like this, the correct point of intonation, that's not the right expression, but bear with me, the intonation point of this fret should be right in the middle there, okay, top center of the fret, and with a flat spot on it, that intonation point has moved literally a millimeter closer to the nut that way, and that throws out the intonation. So a very flat fret, not only is it a little harder to play, it actually does mess up the intonation enough so you'd notice it, which is why I go to these lengths to reshape these frets. And so as I'm cutting the shoulders off these flattened frets and heading towards this thin pencil line, that pencil line is effectively represents the intonation point of the fret moving back into the center, dead center, top dead center of the fret, and that's exactly what we want to make it intonate properly. Now here's the one I was talking about, these great big flattened frets. So I'm kind of just going to let the diamond coating on this file do its work. And you can see that it's got a lot of work to do in the middle, and I'm just rocking a bit from side to side to help it on its way. Just got to get it back, get the shoulders worn away, and ultimately you can reach a point where you can't really go any further. There's not enough height left on the fret for you to chisel away at its shoulders anymore, and in which case you kind of have to accept you've got it as good as you're going to get it. And right now that intonation point has come a long way in. It's probably risky, that millimeter difference, and we're closer to the middle of the center of the fret. Like I said, if you absolutely had to kind of continue to work it a little bit more accurately, you can use your triangular file and work even tighter onto the top of the fret. It's not strictly necessary in this case, but it does give you that little extra precision, that hand done version. But it's, you know, the downside is it's slower. The upside is that it never touches the top of the fret, whereas this usually does. So actually the three-sided file method, the manual oldie-fashioned method, is probably the only strictly accurate one that actually guarantees that you don't remove any of the relative, or you don't undo the relative levelness that you've just achieved. So there you go, look, you can see the dust floating around everywhere. It's very pretty. So that's done. That's the frets re-profiled, as or re-crowned they call it, but to me it doesn't make sense calling it re-crowned because we never actually touched the crown. That's the whole point. But we do re-profile the fret itself. We reshape it and re-profile it. So that's, to me, that's the better expression. Okay, so having done that, I'm just going to, for now, take away as much of the dust and the marker pen as is possible. Give ourselves a clean slate, clean thing, palette, slate, paper, board, table rasa, tabula rasa, whatever they call it. Tabula rasa, clean slate, clean table, flattened table, cleared table. I never studied Latin or any such jumbo mumbo. Right. Okay, sorry. Goes without saying, for those of you who don't like hours of waffling on, this is not the videos for you. Okay, look, so here we are. We've done most of the hard work, governor. The next bit is, again, dead simple, really. It doesn't involve, well, it's simple, it's brain off kind of work, but the next part is, this stuff is not low tack. Anyway, what I'm doing next is to get all of this done prior to going off and consulting Uwe on what hardware and stuff to do next. So we're going to take this to the next stage, which is having leveled all the frets, having re-profiled or reshaped them so that they're now more as arch shaped as they can be. The next stage to finish off would be to polish them all out, and I have a sort of standard process of doing that with three grades of sandpaper followed by a complete micro mesh set, and once that's done, the frets will be in kind of ready to go playing condition, and all we really have to do is just work out what we're going to do with the electrics, the hardware and that sort of stuff. So I'm going to hang this up here. I've got halfway through. I need to cut some strips to allow me to get in and out of the tighter frets, and then I'm just going to go and do that sanding, and I'll just switch the video off now because that's pretty boring. It takes about a good half an hour of sanding to do, but as I say, once that's done, all the precision stuff is finished and the rest is fun. Well, I'm not saying this wasn't fun, but we can switch our minds off and go shopping for parts, and that's the fun bit, and then it will be a matter of shielding things and installing things and making things sound better as well as play better. So the real core of it will be done any minute now once we polish these out, which is the nice bit. It's a downhill in a nice sense of the word from here onwards. Now I keep losing blades, it's ridiculous. So I'll pull another one. So what I do is, I'll stop in a second, but I have a sort of an absolutely bog standard repeatable system. I have 4 bits of masking tape on this board. I cut into 4 strips, as you can see here. I cut 2 of the strips into 3s, third width, and I cut 2 into halves, and then I cut them all into 4. Whoops! Throw the knife around. I cut them all into 4, and then I've got enough to finish masking off the whole of the guitar, including the narrow together frets. So it's a pretty standard, dependable system, and it means I don't have to think about it. I always end up with a few more bits than I actually need, but I've also got some spare in case they peel back and I need to quickly cover them off again, which I advise you do to avoid any damage to your fingerboard, which is something you really don't want. So there's my longitudinal cuts, and I go across the strips, and without any further ado, that's me ready to stand this up at the back. Stand up at the back. Bring the guitar back onto here. Quick brush down. Now, as I'm looking at this guitar, by the way, I'm looking at that ugly looking neck lacquer, and I'm just wondering, just trying to wonder all the time whether it's, I can't see it really now, but how repairable it is or salvageable, and how important it is to Uwe to clean that up. It is a little bit of a shame, and it's one of the things I've noticed with white budget guitars is they can really pick up discoloration very easily, and can look, maybe it happens with you know, expensive guitars too, but it does not look ugly on a white guitar. But anyway, so interestingly, years ago, or somewhere on my video list, was a Chibson that came, customer sent in, and it caused a lot of arguments and controversy, only because some people have very strong views and sort of like to blow off about Chibsons, and if you do anything with Chibson, or you name your videos anything to do with Chibsons, you do open yourself up for a lot of criticism. But interestingly, from my perspective, this guitar here is actually a more reassuring quality to begin with than that Chibson was, that somebody presumably paid quite a bit to have made in the style of the Steve Jones Les Paul, like white or creamy coloured Les Paul, and this is a more convincing basic unit, is a little bit better. It's at least as good, if not a little bit better, and I'm sure it cost a fraction of the price as well. But like I said, the posts have just fallen straight out of this. It isn't a problem because they only stay in under pressure. The bridge is being pressed in and so on, so it's not the end of the world. But it's the kind of thing that it probably wouldn't hurt to be just lightly glued in. They're not exactly going to need to come out again, and you don't want them coming out, you don't want them pulling forward. The other thing too is that unusually it doesn't have a bridge earth, which is typically, I'm not quite sure why it's critical to have one, if I'm honest, but it's traditional to have an earth to the bridge. Does it come from the days of when you ran the risk of getting direct current from your amplifier or something? I'm not even sure technically. I don't know enough about electronics to tell you whether it's strictly necessary, but it seems to be still commonplace to have a bridge earth. And I guess what it means is that what does it mean? It means that if you were to get a shock from somewhere else other than the guitar, it would earth you, the guitar earths you to the earth outside, which, does that mean that the charge would run through you quickly to the outside earth, or I don't get it. But anyway, it's commonplace for guitars, or it used to be, to have an earth. It's something I don't know enough about. Just kind of follow it because that's what everything has. Anyway, this one doesn't have it, so there's no harm in putting it in, I don't suppose. The point is, it shouldn't make any of the electrics noisier or quieter. The electrics are noisier or quieter, will be noisier and quieter, often depending on whether they are correctly earthed or not, and they get earthed via the jack plug or their connection to a common earth, which comes into the guitar through the jack plug earth. So as long as all the components are earthed and it's shielded, it shouldn't be very noisy. Obviously it will squeal if the pickups are unpotted, which is the case here, and that was a horrible level of noise. Actually, you wouldn't want to try and play that loud anywhere, and certainly wouldn't want to turn up any high gain on it. Okay, so that's the neck. Sorry, I didn't mean to bore you with that, but since we're here, and since you have a full range of human freedoms and autonomy to switch off at any time that you hate what you see, I respect your free will. So what I've done is I have covered up this guitar. And what I do every time, without fail, and even to the degree that some people say, hey dude, surely you don't need that much masking tape. Well, the reason I cover it all up here is simply because when I use the sandpaper, it's all too easy for sandpaper to hit the leading edge of the guitar, which I don't want to have happen. So, using up lots of cheapish masking tape here to safely mask off the front edges of this guitar means I can fire away with my sandpaper without any fear of scuffing or scratching the front edge of that. Now look at this. Last time you'll see a completely white guitar. Wouldn't that be nice? A Milky Bar guitar. Anyway, look, that's my guitar, and all I have to do now is pick my sequence of sandpapers from my cleverly arranged sandpaper sequence kit, and with all of that for each, I just need, where's my ruler gone? Sorry. This will make me two guitar setups worth of sandpaper. So I'm going to cut it down the middle, tear it down the middle, and make myself two of each. Well done. Two of each of these grades per job. So what I end up with is 2 6s, 2 1000s, 2 1500s for this guitar, clunk, and then a set which I'll cut again and store for the next guitar. And also then I use a set of micro mesh which pick up where the 1500 grit leaves off and takes me through to 12,000, which is playable polish levels, which is great. You just get straight on and play. Now somewhere I had a clip which is gone. And here it is. There's my clip, and I'll clip that to there with some paper for another time. Alright, so I am going to stop here. This is going to get mighty boring and dusty. But there's my paper, slap. Here's my micro meshes, and here's my shaped block, which is helpful for doing my stuff. See you in a bit. Hey, good afternoon. It's May Day, Monday, bank holiday, but guitars just go on and on and on. So I'm Sam, this is Reloved Guitars, and we're in a very cluttered workshop at the moment, because more than usual, because we've had family over staying, and the spare room, which is normally filled with my guitar stuff, has obviously been turned back into a bedroom for the occasion, and so it should be. But anyway, folks have gone home for now, my son and his girlfriend, and I'm keeping the shed loaded up with cardboard and cases and stuff which normally live in the spare room, for the simple reason that we've got some more family coming over from the States. So hi Becca and Matt, coming over from the States in a few weeks, and it just doesn't, from my perspective, it doesn't seem to make any sense to struggle up and downstairs with all this stuff in order to put it temporarily back in the spare room, in order to empty it all out again when we're expecting the next visitor. So you know what, I'm going to make it work, and there's not a lot of room, but it's just enough to get around in, and some things are hidden. So what we're doing is we've got Uwes Les Paul left-handed beastie, and I don't know if you, well, it's only minutes ago, seconds ago in this video, but the last place I was at was having just filled out some of these kind of huge overcuts on the routing here, just mainly to recover a couple of anchor points on, strengthen the anchor points for the pickup rings. And also what I did while I was there is I put a Morris Reloved on the back and lacquered that. Now I lacquered that with, I tried it first with polyurethane lacquer, and it didn't look quite right, and I have a feeling this is somebody's kit guitar somewhere along the line. I think it feels, I can't tell, but it feels to me like it's more likely to be a home sprayed nitro kit. I don't, well no, it's not a kit, it's a brand, but it feels like it's a nitro finish more than it is it doesn't feel polyurethane to me. I could be completely wrong. Anyway, I did it with I keyed it up and I did it with nitro because it was much easier, and it was giving me a bit of a yellow cast on the other one, so I wasn't too happy with that. So what we've got for this guitar is we've got the Wilkinson hot humbuckers with the cream rings, These are 4-wire jobs, but we're just going to do it as a standard 2-wire. We've got some pots here. We've got a whole set of new tuners ready to go on the Wilkinson tuners. With a bit of luck, they should fit onto the 45-degree holes as previously. Now, like I said, I've not been able to. I really am going to get my brain around this left-hand, right-hand thing when it comes down to left-hand, right-hand tuners on 3-a-side guitars, and I've tried everything I could to make sense of it. So that should turn that way, and it does. So that theoretically doesn't make any difference, although there are such things as left-handed tuners for 6 in line, which is, you'd think that was really simple, wouldn't you? But it's really confusing. It is for me. I think I probably mentioned that when I was doing my gliding training, I was the guy that when the instructor shouted at me to kick left rudder, I would more than likely go with the right rudder. And I don't have any problem with directional, or direction finding or anything. Just something wasn't quite. Sometimes under pressure, when people are yelling at me to go one way, I go the other. Oppositional defiant disorder, I think they call that in children, but anyway. Now these are supposed to be 3-a-side, so either I've just been completely lucky and picked the right 3 for the first side, or else something's gone wrong and I've got 6 in line here. Oh, the neighbours. Right, well, that seems to be right. These are, as it happens, Wilkinsons Easy Lock tuners, so they have the sort of double hole in the post thing, and actually that's not the primary reason I bought them. I bought them because they have the 45-degree screw angle, but also because they're 19:1, which is a really nice, smooth, progressive tuning ratio. Somebody on my Facebook page the other day recommended trying some Steinbergers on the other guitars I'm making, the headless guitars. They recommended Steinberger tuners, which are apparently 40:1, which is like, ooh, heavenly. So they're also heavenly expensive, so I really haven't got the kind of cash knocking around just a second for those. I'll stick to the 19:1s. The other reason for that, sticking to those as well, is because actually they're really useful for certainly on the guitars with headstocks. They're very good for counterbalancing the body. They have a nice weight to them, so it's sort of useful in that respect. So I'm just going to get me a little fine screwdriver. These are pretending they look like Phillips. Sorry, star shape. You know the ones. Is that Phillips? Posy. That's the ones. So we should be dead on the mark with these 45 degrees. And I just got the Mr. Reloved Morris face in the right place there. That was just, had just enough room to fit him there to the outside of the tuners, which I did check at the time, but there isn't an awful lot of room on the back of the headstock. There's more obviously on the front. So I'm just going to stick these in because that's our job done. The condition of this paint job is not very good, and it's got quite a lot of black stuff caught in the. That's what makes me wonder about the home sprayingness of it. Anyway, it's got a lot of black. I don't know if it's damp or grease. Damp or grease tied up in it. But short of a complete respray, I don't really think I would get that out. So when it came to it, the poly, I didn't like the slightly yellowed colour it was giving, so I took it all off, took the first decal off, and keyed it up again, and went with the nitro, because we've got, actually at the moment, well not today, but the last week we've had very low humidity, which has made it kind of ideal for a quick outdoor blast with the nitro. It's not often you get that in the UK, so I took advantage of that. So, but as a result, it's nicely flat, but it's also, I've left it with a slight orangey peel thing. I didn't want to put on loads and loads of layers. You have to do quite a lot, build up quite a thickness if you're going to flatten it back and sand it back to a polish. And I think for me, I quite like there's a kind of, not factory-ish, but there's something factory-ish about the slight orange peely finish. But yeah, because there's sort of fingerprints built into this lacquer here as well, which is a bit on the front of the headstock. So it's shouting. So it's never going to look great. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is that I've made it, put a Morris on, he looks pretty cool. And I'm just making sure that we've got this shouting. Anyway, yeah, making sure this is all good. Had an interesting couple of days. My son and his girlfriend have been down from Cardiff, and the fun, we've had some fun with the cats who've been bringing in animals, and it began a few days ago when Morris's sister, Yummy, brought in 2 baby voles, and you could see the cats sort of hunting down the hedgerows about, I don't know, a couple of 100 yards away from the house. And sure enough, she brought this baby vole, and the first baby vole, and it was pretty, was pretty unhurt. So I put it in a box, and I tend to do that, let them recover from their initial shock, put them somewhere quiet. And anyway, she brought another one, and so by midnight I was out here doing stuff, and I had 2 of them out here with me. And of course, as I was looking after those baby voles, they're kind of about so big, and as I was looking after them, I could see the cats were still down there, just watching, waiting for the next something else to kill. So I waited till the cats were in, kind of bedded down for the night, and then I decided to go and put them back. And I put them back, released them. They were pretty well recovered by then. I went and released them close to, or very near to, where they came from, because there's the bank voles, so obviously they like to live in holes in the bank, so there's no point putting them away from where the cats were, because they wouldn't, as young creatures, they wouldn't know where they were. So I put them back near their home, and sure enough, next day, in fact sometime in the afternoon the next day, the cats caught them, or Yummy caught them one by one, and brought what pretty quickly appeared to be the same 2 back. I had one, and when I went out to band rehearsal, Claire or Thomas actually rescued the other one. So by the time I came back, we had 2 together, and they clearly know each other. It was really sweet. They huddled up with each other, and anyway, it sort of went into their recovery mode. Now, then we kept them in a box inside, and it struck me that being little tiny, well, not tiny, not babies exactly, but being young, they would be impossible to put them back where the cats got them from, because they would inevitably be brought back out and wouldn't survive. So basically, I'm just looking for where's the thing with all the things in. Here it is. Basically, when we went into town the next day, I bought a little tank in the pet shop, and I really resigned myself to having to look after them until at least they were... There you go, that's what comes from moving everything around in your shed with no room to put anything anywhere else. Yeah, so they were... Realistically, it just became clear that I was going to have to keep them at least until they were bigger. And with a bit of luck, might be able to release them later on in life when they were larger. Anyway, so we bought this tank, brought it home, and I've since put them in this clear fish tank. In fact, they're over there. And if you've got, I don't know how you're doing for charge, but let me show you. It's a bit dark over there. But they lived indoors over the weekend, but it drove the cats completely mad. So right now they are currently living Velcro to the shelf in here, so there's no way the cats are going to flip them off, even if they find them. So there's, in that little hole there, underneath the cut grass, we've got soil on the bottom, we've got cut grass, some stones over there, and the 2 voles are living, they sort of cuddle up together in there, and then they've got a little water thing here, which I fill with pipette and little mouse food and bird food mixtures going on in here, which they really like, and they're such fun to watch. They're so cute. They're not quite like mice, because they're slightly different. Don't have quite the cute mousy features, but they're very sweet and they're very young. So, and they're clearly comfortable being together in this tank. So, not ideal. I don't like keeping things away from the wild, but you know, under the circumstances, one of them was practically dead when I got it from the cats. And I don't know if you've ever rescued small animals, but it was in that sort of spasming death throes, so it really was on its way out. and amazingly it's recovered, come back to full health by the looks of it. Now both of them had also had some damage to one each of their paws, so at first they weren't able to lift up food and eat it double-handed. However, since then they seem to have recovered their use of their paws, so they're both holding food perfectly well, which is great to see. So anyway, enough of those. You'll probably get to see them when they come out at some point. They're nocturnal, so they do sort of get busy at night, and I can just put a torch on top of the clear plastic lid of the tank and you get a really good view. So night time, maybe later on tonight, I'll show you them in action. Okay, so what we got here is we've got curved plastic there. The original is curved plastic. We've got curved plastic here on the new ones. It's slightly lighter colour and they're newer, so let's go with that. The only difference is they'll have slightly different screw hole position, or tend to have slightly different screw hole positioning. Actually, it seems quite good. So we'll go with the new ones unless they present difficulties. So what I've got to do now, we've got the new bridge, we've got the old stop bar, we've got the new bridge posts, which I'm going to glue in, but I'm also going to put through an earth wire. There's a hole for it, which is good, and it goes in at the back of the electrics cavity just here. I'm going to put in a earth wire to the bridge. I've got the same thing here. I'm basically going to take out everything we're going to keep and put aside everything we're not. So we've got gold knobs, old bridge over there. Keep the thingy, and then we've got a load of bits and pieces. We don't need those posts. We do need the strap buttons. We do need the thing for the thing. We do need the nut and the washer for the switch. We need the other strap button. We'll put some new felts on there, and then all of these pots and also the pickup are history, but we might need some of the small screws here and there. I'll put it over there and I'll watch it fall over the place. But basically we've gone full-size pots on this, and this wiring isn't bad, but I'm going to rewire it with some shielded cable. A bit chunky, but it'll do. It'll be shielded. And I'm not going to film me just messing about finding the right bits of wire here and there, so I will stop this in a second, but I'm just going to lop off these wires for a minute. Now what am I looking for here? We got some earthings here, we got some blue to the earth, okay, and that wiring system. What's this pair here? So that's earth and okay, so that's the black, the grey and white one on this case was out to the jack plug. So middle and earth out to the jack plug, and then we got the left in and out. So let's just chop them off. So that's what I'm keeping. I'll use this somewhere else some other time. It's kind of useful, plastic covered wire, and we'll use some. We'll use some of this really chunky shielded stuff. But it's a bit messy over there, so I'll dig it out in a second. Okay, so I'll put this back in here. This is a spare bridge now. This one, the good thing about going for a roller bridge is not only does it help with the tuning stability, but it also, you can see the thickness, it gives you a bigger range or a larger range of intonation movement, which is pretty good. These are actually, they are marginally different on the sound.